Okay, well, as they said, it's a hard act to follow, but he can do it because his book is going to do it for him. I'm sitting here with A.R. Roberts, and what does the A.R. stand for? Do you mind telling me?
Alan Richard.
Okay, that's right. I know it now because Alan Richard. All right. Because from Atom to Omega, an anatomy of UFO phenomena. And I have to tell you, we've all heard about UFOs. We've all heard, we hear it from here and there. But your book was so full of facts. And I'm a believer anyway because I love science fiction. I mean, I've always enjoyed a lot of the books that, our famous writers have done. But in fact, one of the books that made a difference to me was Stranger in a Strange Land with Heinlein. I don't know if you ever read that, but it absolutely changed me. I love that book. Oh, my heavens. And so I've been into a lot of this, and when I read your book, I said, you're a brave soul. So let's talk about why you did this, and as a musician, this is not really your thing, but how did this all come about?
Well, it started out in 1955 when I was volunteer in the Ground Observer Corps. People may not remember that. The older folks might, but that was the Air Force project that was designed to deter a surprise air attack from the former Soviet Union. And I was living up in Plattsburgh, New York, and our post was on top of Physicians Hospital, which was the highest point in the city. In the spring of 1955, people all over the city started seeing strange things in the sky, and some of the observers on the post did too. Now, I was the youngest observer. I joined when I was 14. But I'd go up on a Friday night, and I had my mother's permission. Things were a lot safer back then. I'd stay all night, usually till after dawn. And it was, pretty much routine thing, just call in reports of aircraft flying over to a filter center, which our filter center was located in Albany.
Excuse me, did you have binoculars? What were you observing? Is that what you observed with
we had binoculars? Yeah, and we had a good 360-degree view of the whole sky because we were right up there in the highest point in the city. And at the same time, in 1955, there was a new Air Force base under construction at the south end of the city. And this is when all of the UFO reports started coming in from people all over the city. Well, I'd seen a few things, during my watch that I couldn't explain, but one particular night, Jim Roddy, who was the news director of WEAV radio up there, and Art Pierce, who was the station's newscaster. And they came up. In fact, they came up very frequently over the weeks because of all the sightings that were being made, and hoping to see something for themselves. And one particular night they came up, and they'd spotted something out at the south end of the city, and they lost it in the glare of the construction lights where they were laying the runways of this new base. Well, I didn't see it because I was inside the post on the phone calling in a routine aircraft report. And they were really adamant that this was not a conventional aircraft. The way it moved, it just, and disappeared in the glare of the construction lights. Well, they wanted to go over and investigate. And, since we got to know each other pretty well over the weeks, and they asked, if I wanted to go along. Well, they had my curiosity up. I said, okay, so I put the post out of operation for a few minutes, and I went with them. Now, the nearest we could get to the area was this dirt road that had just been cut through the woods. It was going to skirt the northern perimeter of this base. Right now, it was just a dirt road full of muddy ruts, and the car was bouncing wildly in this crazy. It was just a terrible condition. I mean, it hadn't been paved or anything. Well, we came to a clearing, and we didn't know where we were. And we couldn't see anything because we were surrounded by trees. So we pulled into this clearing where I think they'd used it to park some of the equipment that they used to open up the road. And Jim gets out of the car. He says, I'll climb up on the car. I'll see if I can look over the trees, spot a local city light. It gives us an indication right where we are. And he gets up on the car, and trees are too high. Can't see anything. They're obstructing all view of the city light. So he gets down. He says, well, let's go a little bit farther down the road. And if we don't see anything, well, we'll go back. Now, just as we're ready to get in the car, all three of us looked up at the same time. Right above our heads was this huge white oval thing it was just skimming the treetops. We guessed maybe 30, 40 feet above the treetops, and it seemed like it was dripping or emitting sparks. Not a sound, silence. It was just drifting slowly to the east, and in several seconds it was out of sight over the trees. Well,
and the three of you saw it.
Three of us saw it. I think it was Jim that said, "Did you see that?" And yeah. But the funny thing is, the thought of trying to catch up to this thing, going back down the road, I don't think it entered our minds. It didn't me, because the road was too rough. We never would have been able to catch up to it anyway. You can drive 5 miles an hour bouncing around, and it would damage the car. Well, anyway, we went back to the post, and this sighting, this bothered me for an awful long time.
You were a kid at this point.
I was at the time. I was 15 years old at the time, and I didn't know what it was. Somebody said, "Well, maybe it was a flare." Well, I've seen flares, but it couldn't have been a flare because it was moving horizontally at such a slow speed, and flares don't do that. So I never. I figured it's always possible with some kind of a weather-related phenomena, but that didn't seem to make sense.
Yeah, but you were with these news people.
Yeah.
So what did they say, and what did they do about it?
Well,
did they report it, or were they afraid that they would be people think they were crazy?
Yeah, see, they came up a lot, but they didn't put a lot of this stuff on the air. I mean, it did make the news here and there, but usually most of in the newspapers and everything, they treated it as a joke. In fact, there was a reporter at the Albany Times-Union. It was about Albany was like about 140 miles south of us. He wrote articles on what are they drinking up there, and they're.
But the three of you saw this.
Yeah. Well, we invited this reporter from the Times-Union to come up one night to visit our post, and he did. And once he got to know us and saw what we were doing, he realized we're not alcoholics, we're not lunatics, and we don't look at every light in the night sky and think it's a UFO or something, And then he realized, hey, these guys are pretty serious. And he wrote another article later on where he'd seen something himself. So he kind of changed his tune on that a little bit. But anyway, this bothered me for it was 33 years until 1988. And that's, I says, I've got to look into this just for my own satisfaction. So I started doing some research on it, and the more I got into it, the more involved it got. I just couldn't believe how complex an issue it was. I mean, I found information that, to me, were clues that had been completely overlooked because they weren't even recognized as being a part of this puzzle, And I just kept making notes and consolidating information, reading reports, studying everything that some of the more credible researchers were into. And over the years, as my investigations here evolved, then I began, I started putting things together a little bit. I says, everything you read on the subject's about somebody's experience, somebody's abduction, or a particular incident like Roswell or the Phoenix Lights, but what does it all mean? Somewhere along the way, there's got to be some kind of information. Maybe I connect all the dots and see what I can, figure out, if anything.
Let me tell everybody, if you've just tuned in, just stick with us because this is a really interesting conversation. The author is A.R. Roberts. The name of the book is From Atom to Omega: An Anatomy of UFO Phenomena. It's our book of the month in Boomer Times, and this is amazing. I'm Anita Finley, and just keep listening. Go ahead. Go ahead, A.R. This is wonderful.
Well, once I got into it, then I eventually got into the biblical aspect of it, and that's really what blew my mind. I noticed things between the abduction part of the UFO phenomena and some of the Bible stories. And I'll give you an example. In the Bible, you've got these stories of how these angels always seem to appear out of a brilliant light. And alien abductions, you've got these little gray beings that abduct people appearing out of a brilliant light. Is the same thing. I said, gee, I wonder if there's any correlation between this. So then I started looking at these stories in more depth, and I started look at them in a logical perspective. I said, gee, this sure sounds like there might be a connection here. And then when you get into the abduction phase of the UFOs, one of the things that's involved with the abductions is they seem to be interested in the reproduction systems. They abduct women. They inseminate women with hybrid fetuses. In about 3 months, these women are abducted again. They remove the fetuses. There's been women that were abducted that did not have any eventual. Sometimes you get these memories that will surface because usually all memories of these events is blocked from the conscious mind.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. Just take 1 second, please. Why is that possible? Who is doing that? How is it being blocked?
Well, these little gray guys or these aliens, they have some very powerful mental control, and they don't talk. All the communication seems to be in a telepathic nature, whether the abductee is telepathic or not. They hear the words in their mind, or they just know what's being said to them.
Oh yeah, that's very. I believe in all that. So you're saying that particular person knows that she has been abducted somehow, but she doesn't remember much about it, right?
Well, it's memories that begin to surface later on. Why they do this, whether they're trying to keep what they're doing a secret, I don't know. It could be that if a person was returned with complete recall, that could be a very traumatic, effect on the person. So it could be they're trying to prevent that, but eventually these memories do start to resurface, and there's a lot of programmed memories that confuse the facts. I mean, what you might remember might not actually be what really happened. But anyway, some of these women have turned up pregnant with no idea of how they got that way because they were not sexually active at the time of conception. And
what kind of a child do they
within
have?
3 months, all of a sudden they turn up not pregnant. And it wasn't false pregnancies because their gynecologist verified that there was a fetus in the womb.
I didn't read this in your book. I must have missed that. I have to go back and do that.
Yeah, it's in there in the abduction
No kidding.
So, you've got these women abductees who somehow seem to have miraculously conceived. And when you go back into the Bible, you've got some of these women that also have seemed to have miraculously conceived, old and sterile women. So you've got these combination of things. You got to wonder, is there some kind of a connection between the UFO phenomena and maybe the deity? And there's so many things in the Bible. There was no such thing as a Bible till about 300 years before Christ. That's when the Hebrew leaders began to incorporate the 5 books of Moses into the Hebrew doctrine. And then from there, religions all over just sprouted up all over the place, and everybody kind of interprets.
And I have to interrupt you to tell you that I just saw a video in Turkey. They discovered a goat herder on his property found some remains of a city 12,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And so we know there's things that have happened long before any of this, right?
Oh, sure. I mean, that's another thing. A lot of people read the Bible and aren't really reading it. A lot of the words there have meanings that have been misinterpreted by the scribes, I think, who translated these words into writing. Take the word Adam. In the Bible, he's portrayed as the very first human being on the planet. Now, we know that man was around long before that.
Right.
I mean,
that's why your book is From Adam to Omega. Great name.
And when you look at the footnotes, a lot of people ignore the footnotes in the Bible, and they believe what they read in the verse is fact, and that can be very misleading. If you look at the footnotes, where it's relating to the word Adam, Adam, the word from which Adam was derived, can also mean all of mankind, or mankind in general. So actually, when Adam could very easily be referencing a complete whole civilization, it's just hard to believe in 6,000 years everything that, according to the Bible, everything began 6,000 years ago. But
well, A.R., are people clamoring? I mean, you've written the book now. How long did the book take you to write?
Well, I researched for 23 years. Mostly I started out, just to research for my own satisfaction, but once I had all these notes and I started to consolidate things and try to make sense out of everything, trying to connect all the dots, I said, gee whiz, there's looks like there is a reason behind all of this, and a reason for government secrecy, why they have to keep it a secret. If they, I'm sure that they're involved with at least one extraterrestrial race. This happened probably sometime after 1947, the Roswell incident, and all of a sudden you've got all this secrecy going on. They don't want to admit anything. They're covering up a lot of things, and it's such some of this disinformation. Yet they're keeping the subject alive with disinformation and misinformation. And misinformation, I'll give you a classic example. That is the Socorro, New Mexico incident occurred in 1964. A police officer was chasing a speeder. He saw this thing shoot across the sky. Thought it was a plane that was going to crash. He let the speeder go. He turned down a dirt road. He come over a rise. He saw this white egg-shaped craft sitting on four legs with two very short beings dressed in white clothing standing beside it. His radio went dead, and he started to approach this thing, and all of a sudden flames shot out of the bottom, and a loud roar started to rise off the ground. Scared the bejesus out of him. He ran behind his car, and he crouched down. As he watched the thing lifted off the ground, I just hovered in the air for a while before just eventually the flames stopped, the noise stopped, just hovered there for a while. Then it drifted off to the west. The officials at White Sands were notified. They came to investigate, and Captain Richard T. Holder from White Sands, he arrived with a team about 90 minutes later. And he thought, he was interviewed on Unsolved Mysteries, and he said he thought it was probably something that classified that got away from the range that this police officer saw. But he said once he got there, he realized that wasn't the case. He looked for clues that it might be a hoax, but everything he saw seemed to support this officer's story. Well, the thing is, 21 years later, after the incident's been long forgotten, the Air Force comes out with a new explanation. They said, no, this officer probably saw the lunar landing module that was being tested at White Sands. They produced records from White Sands showing that this lunar lander had been tested on the same day. But I had to know that this explanation was going to be shot down, because by then there were a lot of savvy UFO researchers out there that were going to check into this to see if it was true, which they did, and it wasn't. They learned from the official records that the lander was tested on the same day as this Socorro, New Mexico event, but the test ended hours before the officer had his encounter. Plus, the lunar lander could not fly. It was a mock-up with no propulsion system. It couldn't fly. The test was an impact experiment, which was dropped from a tower. And the lander was trapezoidal in shape. It did not fit the description that the officer described of white egg-shaped craft. But the thing is, why, 21 years later, after the incident had long been forgotten, why did they resurrect it with a new explanation, one that they knew would be shot down, unless they have a reason for keeping the UFO subject alive in controversy?
And that's what brings me my big question. Now, actually, you don't know this, but our board operator is very much into this kind of stuff, and I said to him this morning, what's the problem? Is it going to be too frightening? Why don't we know what's going on? What's your opinion?
Well, there's a lot of reasons have been proposed why the government is keeping secret. One, that we've developed, we've back-engineered a lot of this alien technology from retrieved UFO crash retrievals. Another reason they propose is if they were to, they don't want to release this information because, well, they don't want our enemies to know all this technology that we have. Another reason.
You don't think that they have it too?
It's a possibility, but the other reason is that this technology would destroy major industries, the oil industry. It would upset the world economics and so forth. But these are all valid points, really. But I think the Air Force, or this is a secret group within the government that's controlling all of this. And I believe that they are working with at least one alien race. And there's probably more than one involved. Now, and I'm sure they're aware of what's going on, what has been going on for the past several thousand years. And if they were to release the information of what they know about what alien activity was going on in biblical times, that would blow religions out of the world, or out of the water, all over the world.
Maybe that would be a good thing at this point with what's happening with everybody fighting.
Exactly.
Maybe that's the best thing that could happen.
See,
oh my gosh.
that would cause more chaos and worldwide disruption, I think, than any of the other reasons. And why are they? What is going on that they have to keep this a secret? Why, from everything I've learned, and I've analyzed a lot of information. From what I've the information I've gathered, it seems to be a project to accelerate the evolution of the human race on a social, moral, and a technological level. But there were problems 6,000 years ago back in the Garden of Eden when Adam failed his test. That set the project back by about 2,000 years, which is just about how long it took them to come up with a race that the Adam was supposed to have created, but he got kicked out of this garden because he failed his test. So the next race was created by Isaac, who was, I believe, a hybrid, who was born to the barren old wife of Abraham. Her name was Sarah. And then you got these hybrids in the Bible. You got these hybrids being created in abduction cases. You got so many connections to the Bible. And I part 2 of the book is the biblical connection, and I get into that very, very seriously. I've analyzed so many from a logical perspective. I had to put aside all ideas of supernatural beliefs, spiritual beliefs, anything. I had to look at everything basic from a logical perspective from scratch, and see what it tells me, and then just go from there.
I mean, I have to just tell you the book's great. And before I want to introduce Chris West to you because I know he's chomping at the bit. But let me just tell you how to get this book. You want to get this book. I mean, this is the best book I have ever read on UFOs because it comes from someone who really isn't a scientist. He did this from real life understanding. He went and investigated it. I love this book, and it is our book of the month. We're so proud to have it. A.R. Roberts, the name of the book again is From Adam to Omega, An Anatomy of UFO Phenomena. You can go to iuniverse.com. You can go and find it on Amazon. It's worth, Barnes and Noble. It's worth every cent. It's not expensive. It's a paperback. You will want to read this. So, Chris, what do you think? It's a pretty exciting guy to have here today. He's your kind of guy, isn't he?
He is very much my kind of guy, but it's very interesting what you said about the religion aspect. I never thought about that before, but if I'm remembering correctly, the Prophet Muhammad came in on a comet. That could have been an alien ship dropping him off.
Whoa, I have goosebumps.
Well, every religion in the world has basically the same premise, that a god or gods came down from the heaven, created the human race. It's the same premise promoted in the Judeo-Christian teachings, but everybody's they've interpreted the scriptures in different ways. That's why you've got so many different religions, and all supposedly believe in the same God, yet they're all killing each other over because somebody believes something different. It's really crazy. But if you read the Bible, I suppose any Bible, but I've stuck basically to the Judeo-Christian copies of the Bible, and look at it, from a very logical perspective. There's so many things in there. Let's take technology in the Bible. Right in the very beginning of the Bible, there's so much technology and reference in there. Genesis 3:24. It says that a flaming sword was placed at the entrance to the Garden of Eden to prevent Adam and Eve from getting back in. A flaming sword flashing back and forth. Well, what is this telling you? That sounds like a device that we have today. A security device that uses a sweeping laser beam, I mean,
he's good, isn't he, Chris? I love his mind.
Could be all a force field of some sort as well.
On something you said, but if we have it here, they could be over in Russia. They could be in Afghanistan. I mean, these aliens do they really care where they are? Couldn't they be anywhere? They could be in Russia, in Egypt, or Africa. Maybe these people are having the same. Did any of your research talk about any of these other sightings in other parts of the world?
Somewhat. But see, the thing is, other countries could very well have some of the technology that we've developed through crash retrievals. these crashes have been reported all over the world.
Is that
you know.
right?
So we don't know how involved it is with other countries. We just don't know. Germany, I mean, they were way ahead of us in rocket science and things like that, and thank God, that they didn't win the war. But I think there may have been some alien involvement on that. They were ahead of us in developing this technology. We had to develop. There is a reason why they're accelerating our evolution, and it's the technology started to be developed in Germany. We ended up with it after the war, which was to our benefit. But
AR, I knew this would be a wonderful interview. I'm so glad you're here, and maybe we'll have to do is have you come back another time, because we could never go through this.
Yeah, there's so much information.
Yeah, you're so good, and we're running out of time. But I can't tell you how. I mean, I really am a person that loves this. So when I saw your book, and our book reviewer showed it, I said, "You've got to get this book. I love this." And then, of course, I hadn't really gone through it, but I'd review books pretty quickly. I took an evening. I took the next day. I couldn't put this book down. I mean, so people, even if you know nothing about UFOs, you don't care about it, read the book. You're going to love it. It's, as I said, From Atom to Omega, An Anatomy of UFO Phenomena by A.R. Roberts. Thank you so much, Mr. Roberts.
And you might want to visit my website.
Visit the website, yes.
www.fromatoomomega.com.
Okay, the website, too. Get it. So, and read the article that I reviewed in Boomer Times in your May issue. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to The Stars Program with your host, Anita Finley. Join us every Saturday at this same time for another edition of Seniors Taking Active Roles in Society, right here on AM 740 WSBR.